Hi, everyone. I'm here with Chris Albaugh. Chris is an energy healer and holistic guide who uses a framework of universal principles and techniques that help people identify, release, and enhance their holistic well being. Chris specializes in helping his clients process unresolved trauma, abuse, and heartbreak, allowing them to pursue their passionate purpose in their highest vibrational state of heart, body, and mind. Chris's clients have overcome addictions, fear of the unknown, victimization, and lack of intimacy, which allows them to finally step into their dream life and heal their dis-ease. Chris guides his clients to live each day with more gratitude, compassion, acceptance, and unconditional love for what they can and cannot control within their daily lives. Hi, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Mary Beth. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today.
Of
So great.
course, I'm excited that you accepted my invitation, and I wanted to start off right away with your bio. But Chris and I, for people who don't know you, I guess we met on, is it just Facebook, I guess? Facebook?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know, it just seems like I've followed you for a long time, and I always has been like, yeah, I really like everything you post, like totally in alignment, and I really love it. And I just was like, this guy really knows what he's talking about. I've got to get him on an interview because I think what you say is so helpful to people. You do a lot of things with trauma and childhood wounds and helping people release all of that. And I touch on that some, but I love how you get a lot deeper into it. So I thought you would be
Mhm.
perfect for my audience so they get much more balanced view of, I'm always talking about the present moment and manifestation, but it's the truth is we got to go to our past and deal with some of this healing of childhood traumas, addictions, things like that before we can really get to the part of manifesting, right? Because until we get to our subconscious and kind of do some reprogramming, we're going to just keep manifesting the same stuff over and over and over. Would you agree with that?
Right. Yeah, I think, at least for my example, manifestation's easy. It's easy to get it to come. The challenge is maintaining that frequency to
Yeah,
keep it. And
absolutely.
that's where the repetitive patterns come in because, for me, in my examples of when I go back and I've had those redirects or I've had those challenges, getting caught up in that cycle of, well, this happened to me in the past. So you're identifying, okay, how can I change the outcome now that I'm recognizing this? And I think so much of it is learning how to clear that energy block, to clear it, because once we have the awareness, and we've done the healing work, if you will, or the recovery work, as I look at it. And I know in your previous podcast I listened to, you were talking about spiritual recovery.
Yeah.
Because we are spiritual entities in a meat suit, right? And on this physical plane. So how do we bring heaven into our daily lives? How do we keep from the lower frequencies of stress and fear and insecurity, so we can be in the faith to say, hey, this is a difficult moment, but a challenging period of our time, but we keep the faith that this is for our growth. I think, for me, when I was going and learning about the law of attraction and, manifesting and things like that, it was grow, 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 grow. And we get in this mindset that, we always have to be obtaining more. That we're always manifesting, as you know. And the things that we don't like actually are more beneficial than the things that we do like, because the things that we do like, we're like, yay, okay, now I can relax. Now I've got the relationship. Okay, it's all good. We're all happy and in love, and then 6 months later, you're like at each other's throats, and you're like, what happened? Like, we were so perfect in the beginning, And, the way I look at it, everything, and the 5 universal principles that I teach from are gratitude, awareness, unity, growth, and energy. So if we look at it, energy, when we hit that moment of manifestation, we're in perfect alignment. But when our subconscious stuff comes at us, and we, it might drop our frequency down, even if we're unconscious of it, right? And that's been my example. How did I get into, being a coke addict, and how did I do all these things? It was because I didn't think that it was going to hurt me, that I was stronger than, the will up here was stronger than actually the actualization. And it wasn't until hindsight that I was like, oh, that's what happened. Like I talk about my cocaine addiction. I remember someone gave me a nice quantity of it for my birthday, and I was doing it with some people, and I was like, I don't know how anyone could be addicted to this. And 6 months later, I understood. And it wasn't chasing that euphoria, because you weren't getting that anymore. It was actually trying to ease the pain and suffering. And I think going back to our trauma and our life experiences, that's what we're trying to do, is avoid pain. Well, we can't avoid pain. Pain is an essential part of life. And the more we can be grateful for the pain that we're going through, shows our courage, our strength of our heart. Our mind's going to try to take us from that. And being an intellectual, and being so creative, I was always really good at coming up with, and that's what we do really as a coach, right? We give a acceptable perspective to shift the mind to see another reality. And then through our daily habits and our discipline, then we bring them into fruition.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You froze for just a second, but I think we got the whole sentence. For the most part, we know what you said. You just froze for just a second.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense. And I love that you use the word daily, because it's a daily thing. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm just going to learn this law of attraction stuff, and it's like earning a degree, and then you always have it, and it's daily work. Like I said in that last podcast that you said you listened to, it's like we have to keep going to the gym to build our muscles and then to maintain them. So we don't get to just be like, I'm done working out forever, I'm good, I earned it, I earned this body. Nope. There's always stuff we got to do to maintain that through eating healthy, making healthy daily choices. Same thing with this manifestation. We're always manifesting, always, 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 always. So it's just a matter of getting better at, learning how to catch yourself, interrupt those patterns that you were talking about, the stuff from childhood, things that and addictions are. We're always just trying to ease some sort of, we're looking for relief. We're seeking relief. And I was that same way, not with cocaine, but with alcohol. I was just trying to escape and numb out and always seeking relief. And a lot of it was I had to go back and go to the root of that problem of, well, why do I even feel the need to drink every day? Because, it's not normal. But in society, well, alcohol more so than cocaine, right? It's normalized. Like when everybody's doing something, you can't see it as well. And maybe when you were doing cocaine and you got in that addiction cycle, the people around you were probably doing, like most of the people you knew were doing it, so it didn't even seem like it was wrong. If everyone around you's doing it, you start to kind of think it's just what everybody does.
Right. And I mean, for me, it was success, right? Like everything was going good. So, I was using cocaine to be able to do all the things that I needed to do. It gave me more energy. It helped me be more outgoing, and, I could work 2 or 3 days in a row versus, I needing to take care of myself and body. And, I think that's one of the greatest addictions. I mean, there's so many addictions, whether it's food, sugar, relationships. I mean, I know you talk about all this stuff, TV, and a little bit is good, because those are ways for our mind and our heart and our body to relax. And we have to be in a relaxed state to actually be able to respond.
Right.
You know, if we're agitated, if we're over caffeinated, if we're, you know, all these things, then it's easy for us to just react because we're processing energy at such a fast rate that, you know, spirit steps in and there's no buffer. You
Yeah.
know, like spirit is a great protector. It's very destructive because it doesn't care about this life on earth. But you know, because this is just where we came to do some more work. You
Yeah.
know, our higher self is always connected to the divine. And it's like, okay, well, if you don't figure it out this life, you'll get it next time. You know, like
We disconnect ourselves from, like, I mean, I know we can never be truly disconnected, but when we do, I feel so much more clarity. I feel so much more connected to God, source energy, my spirit guides. I feel so much more connected now that I got, you know, these addictions out of my life, to where before it was, everything was more blurry. I had clouded judgment. My discernment wasn't quite it wasn't quite there. It wasn't. And then now it's like, now that I have a clear mind, and I'm able to sleep, because alcohol really messed with my sleep a lot. Now that I'm able to
mhm.
sleep at night, and I just feel so much more connected and to spirit. Do you feel that's the
Okay.
same in your life?
You know, I could say yes and no because, you know, I was just at Sundance and I was speaking on you know, pot. You know, I'm a fan. I was, you know,
I'm a
I'm a
fan.
fan of
You're
marijuana,
like,
fan of marijuana.
yeah.
And I used it in a habitual way. And when I've stopped, you know, here over the last few weeks and, you know, last few months, because I had another redirection, another egoic death. And I kept at, you know, suicidal thoughts came through again, just like they had in the past. And instead of wanting to take, you know, my physical life, I knew, okay, what aspect of my life had to go.
Mm,
And, you know, it was really scary because when I stopped using marijuana, I felt more disconnected. Even though I had the awareness and I was still seeing the signs and I was still seeing synchronicities, it wasn't here. Like I was using kind of marijuana, if you will, in a way to quiet my mind a little bit,
okay.
so I could be more embodied.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's where breath work and meditation and being in nature and, you know, having great conversations with people and things like that help get us back to that center, you know, get us back into integrity, get us back into unity. Because again, we've been so conditioned. Most of us are so unconscious of how much we've been conditioned to say, well, I have to do this. You know, I remember having a conversation with my mom once, and she's like, well, you have to have a job. And I'm like, no, you have to earn an income.
Yes, that's right.
You know, you have to have, we live in this physical plane and we use this energetic currency as an exchange because it's a simple barter. You know, people have an understanding of what it is. And, you know, we talk about the barter system all the time and, you know, in conversation. And one of the stories that I like to talk about is, well, what's the value of a fur coat in August?
Mm,
And what is the value of it in January?
hmm.
You know, that's going to vary, right? Like if I'm down in the tropics, eh, I could go without it, you know, like I don't need that layer of protection. But if I'm in the northern state, you know, the northern hemisphere, or I'm in Canada or Alaska or something like that, that fur coat's going to have a lot more value than somebody that just came from the Caribbean. So it's not a standardization. And I think that's where I think our egoic systems, you know, our man-made things, sometimes make things simple, but because they're simple, we devalue them. You know, a lot more people value things that can be replaced, like stuff, versus the people in their lives that they can't because there's only that one person. So, like when we get upset with somebody and we're like, okay, I'm breaking up, I'm never talking to you again, you're out of my life,
I'm
life's going to
done
be
with
so much
you.
easier. life's going to be so much easier now that you're out of my life. And then we get in another relationship and we see the same patterns showing up. We've talked many times about the mirror, and I think true love and true relationships are pure mirrors for each other, not just in pleasure but in pain, because you can say, hey, I can see where I'm effing up because this person is doing this. Right. And it's not that person, it's me. The reason that I'm seeing it and I'm aware of it and I'm being triggered by it is because there's a shadow aspect of myself that isn't in acceptance yet, that isn't aware that I still am carrying this unconsciousness, and not bringing it into the light and saying, well, that happened. Mm-hmm. But if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be here today.
Right.
If I wasn't robbed, I was just I'm at a friend's house right now, and we were having a conversation, and I said one of the best blessings that I had was my house being robbed, because and they were like,
that's how I am. Like, really? Okay.
Yeah, and why? Because I knew it was a karmic thing. I knew that I was valuing acquiring stuff, to give me a sense of worth that I didn't have within my stuff in myself, because I thought people liked me. But when I was, when everything was taken away and I wasn't able to provide the things that I was providing for them at that level, mm-hmm. they just kind of disappeared. They didn't want to come over and hang out anymore. Why? Because my video game collection got stolen, or, whatever it was that we were doing in commonality. And the conditions of that relationship. And that's why I like to talk about unconditional love, because unconditional is unconditional. It's not based on anything. It's source energy. It's pure spirit. We humans put a condition on things, mm-hmm. and say, this is good, this is bad, this is uncomfortable, this is blah, 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 blah. And when we can recognize that, that's when the healing comes in. I'm heartbroken right now. Why? Because there's something for me to learn.
Right.
There's something for me to understand here about myself, because the person that broke my heart, maybe I gave too much of my heart. Maybe, I didn't have strong boundaries. Maybe I was afraid to speak my voice because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't want to be accused of a certain thing. So that fear kept me from actually having a conscious conversation and saying, hey, when this is happening, this is how I feel, this is how it's making me feel. How can we shift that, within myself first? Because if I don't take it personally, well, then it's not a problem. If your spouse or your partner doesn't do the dishes that day, mm-hmm. and they said they would, instead of going, hey, you said you were going to, what's wrong with you? And they're like, I was tired, I took a nap. You're like, well, do I want the dishes done, or do I want to argue with my partner? Do
I want to be right, or do I want to be happy? Do I want to be peaceful, or do I want to, and sometimes I think it's human to just, I feel like fighting today. Sometimes I think that just happens, and maybe there's some subconscious passive aggressiveness that we haven't really been speaking up, and then it just needs to come out, and it happens. But if you're with, like, we're both really like to teach conscious relationships. If we're with a partner who's mm-hmm. conscious, then things like that can happen. There's going to be contrast. And that's something important for people to know is, I don't care how high you vibrate, you don't get to vibrate your way out of things happening. Like things like, there could be a family member with health issues. You don't vibrate high enough to avoid being thrown curveballs in life. It just happens. But what the reality is you still have contrast, you still have suffering, you still have painful things in your life, you still get robbed. It doesn't mean, oh, well, you weren't vibrating high enough, Chris, so therefore you got robbed. What it means is you have a different relationship with that contrast. When something happens to you, you're going to have a different response. You're going to learn from it. You're going to see it as a growth opportunity, when a lot of people will mm-hmm. just, turn into victim mode, and then it take even years to recover. When someone who vibrates on a higher frequency, They're going to be upset. Don't get me wrong. They're going to be upset.
Right.
They're going to go through that, but it's a much quicker process. We catch ourselves. We look for the lesson, look for that growth. And that's
Right.
the different
Mm.
relationship when negative things happen. That's what I think is so important for people to know.
Right. Well, and it's funny if you look at the word relationship, it's a relation and a ship. So it's the relation and then the container that it's in.
Okay, yeah.
So if we're looking to be able to be skilled sailors in the sea of life, well, then we're going to have to go through those rough waters, because that's going to give us the strength, the courage, all those things, to not be afraid of, certain things. Now, at the same time, you're not going to want to drive your ship into a hurricane, because, you're not probably going to have a great time.
It's not a good idea.
It's not good. So I think pain is inevitable. It's nothing grows without pain, but suffering is a choice, and
Yeah,
suffering is not moving on from that circumstance.
correct.
It's not learning from it or using it as a catalyst and saying, okay, we're out of alignment right now. We're out of unity, right? Because again, everything's related. And energy, the three states of energy are, two polar opposites. And then I don't want to flip the camera off, so
Okay, go for
I'll
it.
do that. And then the third state is where they come together in unity.
Mhm.
So you have heaven and hell, up and down. I mean, however you want to explain duality, and Tantra is really good about talking about non-dualistic viewpoints.
Mhm.
It is what it is. Unconditional love in itself is meaningless. It's neutral.
It's new.
And we as human beings, we create the meaning. Life is meaningless until we give it a meaning. And that will
Even
help
to
us move.
traumas, even to traumas, we attach that meaning, because that's what I always notice. Like, and it's happened with me. Like, I could have a different reaction to a trauma. Someone else had the exact same thing happen, but I didn't really attach a. It wasn't very meaningful to me, and someone else like affects them decades later. The same incident. So we can't compare traumas with people because it's all about. It's so personal. It really is. Traumas are so personal.
Well, and how we deal with it, if we look at, because we're looking for an escape, that's why we have a traumatic response, or reaction. And, my brother and I are both former, I don't think any of us are former addicts. We just learn how to do
Control
things in
it.
a little bit more healthier way. I mean, because you can be addicted to exercise, and people are like, oh, you're so healthy, you're da 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 da, and you're, and I did it to meditation. I in the beginning of learning to meditate, I'd meditate 4 or 5 hours a day, and I'm like all blissed out and all happy and woo, and then all of a sudden my now ex-wife would say something, and I would just rage. It's like, man, I've been working on this. What the heck?
Yeah, what's up with
And
that?
that's the thing. We have to have that contrast to actually grow. But getting back to the story of my brother and I, my journey, I dropped out of high school and got into sales and business and entrepreneurship. And, I wanted to be this great achiever because I was always doing those great things and winning awards, and it made me feel good. And it gave me a sense of purpose and worth. On the flip side, my brother lived more of a materialistic life, and he drank and used heroin
Hmm.
because he wanted to numb, where I wanted to use it as an empowerment tool so I could be more, do more,
You can
achieve
boost.
more,
You're boosting yourself. Yeah.
giving me the energies to move through things, and not get stuck in the past, even though my mind was always, was there, as those cycles were patterning out, I'd be like, oh wait, this keeps happening. What it's different people in different situations, but there's a trust issue here, or there's not enough vulnerability. I've been reflecting a lot about vulnerability, and you know
That's a
being
great one for people.
being vulnerable is courage and strength, because someone said to me the other day, well, you have to be careful who you speak your truth to. And I was like, F that. I'm going to speak my truth to everybody, and if they can't handle it, then we both just got a growth moment.
Yep.
And I've lost a lot of and I've blown a lot of people up. And I've blown a lot of really beautiful relationships up, and I've hurt a lot of people, and I've carried a lot of shame and guilt about that. And for a lot of years, and that's been part of my own challenge, my own growth, because no one wants to hurt people. It doesn't feel good. And I was talking to somebody that I had, a business relationship and an intimate relationship with, and and all that, and then when it went like this, all of a sudden she left, and she went through her healing journey, and now we reunite, right, and we start talking, and she's like, you're a shadow worker, because you bring that stuff out in people, and they don't like it. They see it in you, and you're accepting of it, right? You're like, yeah, I can be that way, like, yeah, sometimes it hurts.
It's the mirror. It's the mirror.
Yeah, right. And then when it happened to me, same thing, right? Like, I'm like, oh, dang, that hurts, and all I wanted to do, the addict in me, is like, how do I make this better? How can I communicate what I was afraid to communicate in the time that the opportunity I had to communicate it? Because that time is now over.
Right.
And until you get a new moment, until you get a new start, a new beginning, or a reunion, or whatever, you're never going to clear that karma with that individual. And that's where, the law of detachment kind of comes in, and saying, okay, I might not be able to fix it with that one person, but look at what it's done for them, and look at what it did for me.
And you're talking about the law of karma, and just, I know that that's a pretty advanced thing, because a lot of people just simplify it, or they think it's about punishment. And would you agree it's not about punishment? It's more about the balancing the universe. There's just always going to be, because some people think, oh, well, that's going to come back to you. Like, it's like almost like a vengeful type of emotion, but really it's just balancing out the universe. It's just, there's always going to be every consequence to an action, like it always is going to be that way. It's not like somebody's punishing you, so to speak. Would you agree?
Well, it's a cause and effect.
Cause
and
and
if
effect.
we think if we take it as a punishment, or as long as we're not victimized by it, right? And oh, this person did this to me, so that's a disempowered state. So by just shifting and saying, well, this happened for me for some reason I don't understand,
For me,
and it came through somebody else, or whatever, but it happened for a reason. We can actually then become empowered by it and say, oh, well, I got maybe a little lazy, or I got a little complacent, or I got a little too much of my ego, or I got in too much of my my own persona or perspective, and I got in protection mode.
it wakes you up. It wakes you up, because until you're on that other side of it, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't really know maybe how I made that person feel. It's kind of like having your life while you're still here. While you're still on earth, how people go through a life review when they have near-death experiences, and they feel what the other person is feeling. Like, you feel it. Like, what better way to learn is that by literally feeling it? And so that's kind of how karma is to me, is like, when we're here on earth, like when we're able to actually experience the other side of it, that's huge growth. Like like you said, it's perspective. If
Absolutely.
we did it as a punishment, then I guess it would feel like a punishment. What label are we going to stick on it?
Well, and going back to, that, like a little white lie. Oh, I did that to save their feelings. Well, what hurts worse?
I want people to tell me the truth, even when it stings. It's like, if I ask a question, and I'm with you about vulnerability too. Like, I don't believe you can really truly be in love unless both partners, and that's part of a conscious relationship, both people have to be vulnerable with each other. Otherwise, you're just faking it. That's not love. Love is not fake. Love is real. And if you have somebody holding back stuff, you both have to hold that space for each other to be honest, and not punish the other person when they finally have the courage to be vulnerable and be honest. And even if it's something you don't want to hear, if you're going to punish them for that honesty, good luck trying to get them to be honest again, because they're going to be afraid.
Right. Or not hold sacred space for them. I mean, and it's hard, right? Because especially unless we come down and we sit down and say, okay, we're going to have this conversation. Our tempers are going to flare. our emotion, we're going to get emotional, we're going to do all these things. And in the past, these are the ways that I've responded through that unconsciously. One of the things that I sometimes do now that I didn't in the past was I walk away. So
Yeah.
I was taught, you stay and you confront and you blah, blah, and me and my dad would just go like this for hours having this, debate. And
Wow.
then eventually we'd realize like, well, we're kind of saying the same thing. We're just using different words.
That's
So verbiage is really important because it's a frequency. And if we can hold that sacred space and say, hey, things aren't going the way we want. I'm feeling upset. I can feel that you're kind of upset, or I feel you distancing yourself. Let's sit down and let's communicate. Let's unify what's causing the dis-ease within our relation, and so we can clear that. And it's not saying that it's going to come up and not come up again, but we're going to have more and more awareness as we grow. And that's going to forge a bond. One of the things that I used to say a lot, is an untested friendship isn't a trusted friendship.
I can see that's
If
very
it's
true.
easy, if it's
Easy when
easy,
things aren't
if
real.
we're,
Like
and I love,
people pleasing, and that's what I used to people please, and I can admit, and I know this for sure, is that you're not being authentic. You are trying to avoid conflict, and you might have great intentions to avoid conflict and you want the other person to like you so much at the expense of being, honestly, you're not being honest. You're not being honest because you're
right.
just saying what the other person wants to hear. I want them to like me. And then it's much more challenging to not be a people pleaser and to be your authentic self and to risk pissing people off. Truly, we're going to piss
Well,
people
and that, well, and that's faith too, like, hey, is this worth fighting over?
off.
Is it worth
Using
me?
discern, you've got to use discernment there. Yeah, like
Yeah,
is this worth it? Is this going to really affect our friendship? If there are definitely picking your battles. Mhm.
right. Someone apologizes for something and you're like, oh, it's okay. It's not a thing because to you, it's not. You've let it go, in that moment. But when it keeps happening over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, it's just filling that cup until we finally have an emotional response
Yeah.
that's out of our normal. We have a reaction, maybe we yell or we get fierce, and then, a lot of my indigenous friends, we talk about the bear came out, you
Yeah.
know, because we're in protection mode now. Like, okay, I'm overwhelmed. I have to protect myself.
Right.
And the more we can calm that, and again, breath work and meditation and being in nature, we're talking about methods to clear that stuff on a moment to moment basis, is going to be really helpful because that's how we process. If I heard this the other day in a breathwork seminar, and I just thought it was so talking about energy for over a decade now, and all these different things. He said, "Here's how we're going to simplify it to trauma. We're not going to go into the story because everybody's story is different, but trauma in itself is uncrossed energy,
Hmm.
and we store that in our physical being and our energetic self. So when we can cry, when we can laugh, when we can sleep, when we can do these things, it's helping our nervous system regulate itself and get calm again because our body, will heal itself. If I cut my hand, and as long as I help keep it clean, because that's the job that I can do, um, it's going to do its job for me.
Hmm.
If I break my arm, if I didn't put it in a cast, it's going to heal. It might heal a little wonky, um, but that's where our intellect, that's where our egoic mind, can make advances. Not that it's improving upon nature itself, but it's allowing us to be in harmony with nature. We can't be eating or consuming out of these plastics and things that aren't natural without an effect.
Right.
And even if we tried to recycle them and all the ways that we can justify drinking our 20-ounce Coke every day, or whatever, oh, I recycle though, it's all good. Well, if you drink one a day for 365 days out of the year, that's 365 bottles. And it's gone to prove that not all that gets recycled, not all of that gets used, and also causes toxicity through
Yeah.
that process. So how do we, I remember when I first jumped into the coaching thing and all that over a decade ago, I'm like, I'm gonna help heal the planet. And then I was like, well, I don't have to help the planet. She'll heal, and Mother Earth heals herself. What we have to do is help the humans quit making a mess, because it's like cleaning our room. If we just throw our stuff everywhere, it's going to get messy again. But if we are conscious and aware of that and say, okay, well, we put stuff away as we use it, well, then we don't have the mess to clean up anymore. And we've been so blessed to have COVID happen to us, because that was exactly what happened. Over that time where the mandates happened, we got firsthand examples of how the planet heals itself.
Mm-hmm.
And everything was doing really well there for a time. Things that weren't working real well in the natural world started coming back into homeostasis, back into alignment, back into
Yeah, the
equilibrium.
air was clean. Animals were coming out. They're like, they're like, oh, we can have our land back because we, stole
Right.
it from them. And, to circle back to what you said about healing ourselves, like our bodies too, do heal themselves. And sometimes it's just that we got to get out of our own way. Like you were talking about with the breath work and the meditation, just not being distracted, and all these distractions, and the nervous system regulation is going to come when we take those breaks. And I think our society, especially, I don't think the whole world is like this, but the United States, we're so much about that hustle, and it should be more about alignment, getting into alignment. And a lot of that is, we're going to make leaps and bounds when we take breaks, when we meditate, even if it's like just chilling out and doing absolutely nothing, it's okay to do that and not feel guilty. But I feel like most Americans, we feel guilty when we take breaks. And that actually pushes us forward when we give ourselves those moments to get our nervous system back in alignment, because most of us are living on adrenaline in a fight or flight mode a lot of the time, especially people in toxic relationships. And I do want to ask you a question that's been bubbling up here. I keep hearing it, like unconditional love, like and this is a conversation I've had with several people. And so I had a spiritually transformative experience when I was like 18. So I felt the whole source in unconditional love. I know what it really is. Do you think that it's possible for humans to be in a relationship and have true unconditional love with each other in this 3D reality?
Well, I don't think we ever reach true unconditional love on this planet. I think we
agree.
can. That's our inspiration. We talked about near deaths a little bit, or you touched on that a little bit. When I committed suicide and I went where I went, I
You're
came
going to
back.
talk about that. You're going to need to talk about that. But yeah, go ahead and finish your sentence. Sorry.
Yeah. When I got back, two things happened. One, I had a purpose that I didn't have before, which gave me more faith and clarity. And the other thing, it made me pissed off, because what's wherever that is, we always point up, right? But it's physical space and
right.
But it's so pure that we can't experience it here.
Yeah, that's what I felt when I had my experience, because I was like, nothing compares. And then it's almost like depressing once you feel how that blissed out, how it's ineffable. You can't really describe it. But,
Right.
I was thinking, I always hear people talking about pure unconditional love. They love their person unconditionally. And then I'm like devil's advocate over here. Like, so if he or she went out and had cheated on you, or did something horrible to one of your children, like, would you still have this pure unconditional love? Like, I don't think so. I think it's conditional love. I think most humans, and if there is somebody like that who would still just, I love you exactly the same, and just the same level, that love frequency is still there, even though you cheat on me all the time. Like, and not the people who are just like low self-esteem, tolerating abuse, not them. I mean the people who are on high enough frequency, like Ram Dass level, right? That there, I don't think there's that many humans who are okay with that and would still be in that same love frequency when the other person has bad behaviors. I feel like that unconditional love that I felt, I haven't seen it here. The closest thing would maybe be with a parent with their child, or our pets even. Like, I think that we can have, that's the closest, but it was still, it's like incomparable to me, like incomparable to what I felt from
Well,
spirit.
I think it's true freedom, and I would say an unconditional loving person would be accepting of this happened.
Right.
There's a reason that it happened. And what can we do, because it's a relationship thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's related. So that doesn't happen again, because it hurt me in a way that I wasn't expecting.
Right.
Now, when it happens and you go, I don't care, because I love that person anyway. I don't care that they decided to go have another experience. And I'm one, I did, my first, my ex-wife and I was in the adult industry for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I had sex with other people, and it was open.
You
And
you had an agreement. It was different than cheating. Yeah.
right. And so I think the cheating part is the breaking of the trust.
A betrayal.
So, or a betrayal, right? So then that opens up abandonment wounds and betrayal and, all that. But, the one thing that I can say is, when we're honest about it and say, yes, I did do that.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the moment, it felt right, and I was just in flow. And next thing I know, it happened. That to me is unconditional love, because you're accepting that the present is where we're at, and what was feeling good in that moment was divinely led.
Mm-hmm.
Now the consequences of that depend on the relationship. And
And
then
that's why you
again,
want to be with someone with a similar lifestyle as you, because if you have someone who thinks, even, there are some extreme people who think that even just talking to a member of the opposite sex is like some sort of emotional affair. And then you have your other people
Mhm.
who are like total freedom. They're like best friends. And you just made me think of something earlier when you were talking that I don't want to forget. When you were talking about, first of all, earlier you said unconditional love is neutral. And then you also were talking about if
Mhm.
somebody does that stuff, it's like it almost sounded like, what's the difference between neutrality and just being okay with all that, being okay with whatever they do, because it is freedom. I get that it's freedom. But what's the difference between that and then indifference? Because isn't indifference like the opposite of hate? Like, you just don't feel anything. Like when does that line like, where, okay, you do whatever you want, it's total freedom, but it's almost like you just don't care. That just popped in my head and I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's for, personal, it's personal stuff, I mean, everybody has their own conditions
Right.
in their heart, in their head. So it's for the individual to speak on, for themselves, and no, not my place to put any standard on that.
Yeah.
But I've asked that a lot of my family, right? Of my parents, because I grew up in a violent home. I grew up in abuse. I grew up in addiction. I grew up in all these things, and my mom stuck it out, right? And stuck with my dad. And now that they're retired and they don't have that separation anymore, right? Because they went to their jobs and they were distracted and all that. Now they're kind of looking at deeper. Why are we still here? Like, what are we doing? Why are we continuing But because they're going through those deeper questions, I'm seeing my dad in a whole new light. Like he's actually giving appreciation now for what
Wow.
my mom does, rather than she's not doing it as good as I could do it. Because the reality of it is if she wasn't there, he'd have to do it.
Right.
And that's not freedom either, because we can't do everything ourselves. I
Mhm.
don't believe we can grow as individuals without other relations. Whether it's spirit, whether it's a book, whether it's a conversation with somebody. We are social creatures. We're all related, and this big spiritual influx now to where we're looking at, the butterflies and the angel numbers and, all these things. We're creating meaning that wasn't there before, to see past our past conditioning. So it gives us this greater sense of awareness.
Right.
So we have to be growing, because if we're not growing, whether and sometimes that can get confusing, right? Because there's all these people wanting to bombard us with information. And then if you look at the word information, information,
Mhm.
like it informs, it creates form.
Right.
And energy is formless. My grandmother once asked me if I believed in God, and in a lot of years, like I didn't want to get married under the name of God. Like I
Really?
despised,
Okay.
oh yeah. I mean, just the religion in itself was so traumatic for me. Like I just wanted to disassociate with all that.
Okay.
And she said, well, do you believe in God? And I said, absolutely. And I can prove that it exists. And she said, how? And I went and looked on the light switch and I said, look, the bringer of light. Turn it
Explain.
on. There's the so
Explain. What is your point? I don't get it.
if if I turn the light off, if I turn the electricity off, it's dark.
Yeah.
If I flip it on, there's light,
Hmm.
illumination. So it's the energy that we can see and we can't see. That's the essence of what we would maybe label God, because it's just a word. And it's how we attach that meaning to it that gives us our directionality.
I like
So,
how Abraham Hicks always brings up the light switch analogy of there's a source of light, which would be source
mhm.
energy, God. There's a source, but there's no source of darkness. The darkness is simply when anything conscious would disconnect itself from the light. So there's no dark switch, but there's a light switch. So you've got your light and then you've got the disconnection from the light. And I thought that was a really interesting
Well,
way
and that's a
of putting it.
and using the light example or light switch analogy, that's what that switch does, is it disconnects the energy.
Yep.
The
Source.
electricity that goes there, that's what it's doing, is it's breaking that arc, so
Mhm.
it can't make that connection. And the beautiful thing about energy is it can illuminate and warm our homes, or it could kill us. It's how we choose to use it that
Mhm.
makes the difference.
The tool,
Cause and effect. Yeah,
right?
cause and effect. So, I mean, I'm a believer in plant medicine. We'll just go there. And
Mhm.
I've done multiple different types of it. And had great visions and great inspirations that have come from that. However, if I'm not integrating that,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter. It's not a savior.
No,
It's
it's
not
not.
a
Just like with my experience when I didn't integrate it and then I got depressed instead, like because I was 18, I didn't know how, but also I was completely sober. That was just triggered by reading a book. And, I don't do plant medicine. I don't like marijuana, but that's just because, because I know that I have an addictive personality and I just think it's best for me to be completely clear, completely sober. And that's my decision for me. However, I don't think that's
Mhm.
true for everyone. And I also think because I had my experience when I was completely in a natural state without any substance, I can get there again. And I've kind of gotten glimpses, but not like not like that first experience. But then
Yeah.
There's something to trying
It's
too
a
hard. We can try too hard to get there, and then that's what blocks it.
well, it's just like the light switch analogy. It's a connector.
Mhm.
So, shamans from all over the world use plant medicine, have for
Yeah.
thousands of years to get that source energy of it, to get that higher connection.
Hmm.
But you can't live there, unless you have people taking. I mean, we can look at all these great meditators and all these people that people put on the pedestal and say, oh, they're such great teachers. Well, what you don't see in the background is all the people that are working for them to allow them to stay in that state.
Well, and yeah, that's true. And do you think, in your opinion, can it be abused? Plant medicine?
I mean, everything can be abused, but I mean, I think even enlightenment, I mean, there's that great saying: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water; afterwards, chop wood, carry water. Why? Because life doesn't change, just how you relate to it does.
Hmm.
So if you can't do that, I can't be on plant medicine and hallucinate, having visions, we'll say, and then go and drive my car. I've tried. It's not a good idea. Or to do something high risk behavior when you're not in your full senses, and I think that's the challenge for all of us, is how do we remain in our six senses,
Hmm.
and our higher senses from there, if you want to believe in in the other things, because there's so many teachings. I don't want to dismiss what
Right,
someone
right.
else is teaching, but we have the five physical senses that helps us stay grounded
Hmm.
and keeps us safe, and the sixth sense is our creative ability to see beyond what is currently here. um, And people, I say a lot with people, what's the difference between um, fear and danger? And the story I like to say is, well, when I'm standing on the ground looking at a roof and say, well, I'm gonna be afraid that I'm gonna fall off.
Yeah.
That's fear,
Hmm.
because you're not on the freaking roof.
Hmm.
Now, when you're on the roof, you're in danger. It's a
Hmm.
possibility. And touching on, and I'm just picking on you just a little bit, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, that to be afraid of a plant medicine ceremony or something like that because you're afraid of what the consequences would be is a form of fear.
Oh,
um
sure, because I don't trust myself in that area, because of my addictive personality. And so I feel like it's a good fear. It's a good fear that I have for alcohol because I've already proven that I'm not good at moderation. I've proven
well,
it to myself several times. So it's
and
not my strength.
it served its purpose. It's taught you the lesson that you needed to have.
Mhm.
So you don't have an addictive personality. You are curious,
Mhm.
you know
Impulsive.
because once you own it, right? Once you say I'm this, then you have a sense of attachment.
Yeah,
So
and by
you
the
could
way, and
even,
I don't ever say I am an alcoholic. I am very against
right,
that. And sorry for AA people, but I actually think that like exactly what you're saying, it holds you in that vibration. I don't put that label. I What I do say is I had for many years, for decades, extremely unhealthy relationship with alcohol. That's how I describe it. And I don't any
right,
longer because I have no relationship. I broke up. I broke
right,
up with that bastard. So I wanted to go
right.
back to relationships with you because that's like mainly what you are healing people with relationships. And something I really wanted to ask is about expectations and boundaries and like standards in a relationship. Like, why are those so important?
Well, I mean, and again, not getting into too much of the label, but boundaries to me are just like you said. I don't want to do this because I don't want to have this kind of effect on
Mhm.
myself or other people. Well, that's a boundary. So
Mhm.
if I was to force you to have a drink with me,
Okay. Good
or try to
analogy.
talk you into it,
Yeah.
right? Then I'm losing the love for myself
Hmm.
by people pleasing. Now, if a standard is this is the way I choose to live, I choose to live in peace, or I choose to be in harmony, or I mean, it can be just as destructive to say, hey, I'm this person that's always in joy,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're unconscious about how they're agitated all the time
Mm-hmm.
because their identity comes from this place of I'm this high vibration state, and there's no way that I can go down that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we had no fear, and I am one that I still suffer from these effects
Right.
of and I quit smoking for over 8 years, and then in my past relationship we both were like, let's let's have a couple cigarettes or whatever. Well, now I'm finding myself in this thing where I'm back in that relationship with cigarette or with tobacco, and I'm walking in more of a nature based and native modality and teachings and things like that, where it's a sacred plant, and so it's part of my prayer when I smoke a cigarette, because when I'm smoking my cigarette, I'm very conscious of what I'm thinking about.
Are you using the safer ones, like real tobacco, or are you like buying actual cigarettes?
Yeah, they're cigarettes, but
Like, oh,
they're
there's
they're
a
organic. They're organic and blah 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 blah
Oh,
blah,
okay.
and because that makes it all better. No, they have the same effect. They just don't have the radioactive isotopes that Marlboros and stuff have sprayed on them.
Yeah.
They're
Like
just
I
not
have organic
they're not as
coffee and my organic coffee, but I bought this stuff
Yeah, exactly.
that has trace minerals in it. It's called Danger Coffee. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's the same guy who made like a bulletproof stuff, Dave Asprey, I believe. But oh my gosh, it's like you do like it's got all these trace minerals, so you really feel like because I kind of was like, am I addicted to coffee? But when you drink this coffee, it's so uplifting, and it's just it's such a clean energy compared to drinking even my regular organic coffee. And this is organic too, but I don't know, it just feels like you're doing something good for yourself. And I love kind of removing that, any kind of question. Like, so I just tell myself that this is so healthy, like I'm healing myself, as I'm drinking it, because if we believe that, like Abraham would say, hey, dirt works the same, whatever whatever we power we give to something.
That's a condition.
The
That's a
condition.
conditioning, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and science has proven it's actually healthier for you to smoke cigarettes, to eat whatever you want, than it is to be stressed about it. Because
Absolutely. Ram Dass had something really important to that effect. Like, I think he was talking about smoking cigarettes. He said, well, there was this guy who was always like, it's been this many days since I counted. Like he would count the days and just be really, and I know people do that in AA too. And I don't do that at all. I just know because I remember it was my friend's birthday when I quit. So I know I'm coming up on 4 years, but, at the end of the day, if you're sitting there stressed out and thinking and white knuckling it and spending all that time, like that's an addiction in and of itself by being obsessed. And that's very stressful. And maybe having that damn cigarette is going to be more relaxing than worrying about the last time you had a cigarette and white knuckling your way through life.
right.
We're not promoting smoking. We're not promoting
No,
smoking.
no. I mean, but we're here to have a human experience, and I
Yeah.
mean, and that's what my deeper teaching and where I'm at in my journey right now is have your human experience. Don't be so don't have such high standards. Don't have such high expectations. Now I don't drink soda and I don't do a lot of other things. That's my personal choice because I don't see value in it. The taste to me isn't worth it, because anytime you try to get someone to change, right, they're like, but I like it. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. Like, I liked a lot of things, but it's not
Right.
necessarily the best, or I love it. I love this person. So it's okay that they're abusing me.
Mm.
That's okay that they call me names. It's okay that, they're doing these things that cause me harm, and I'm forgiving them because I don't have enough worth in myself to say, here's the condition, here's the standard. I remember, in my feeling good about myself and going through my divorce, I remember saying, you don't live up to my standard because I don't believe in lying.
Because you don't believe in what?
I choose not to lie.
Okay.
Lying
Lying.
or being dishonest
Yeah.
or manipulating. You know, my mind can change, my heart can change. Like it is a fluid energy.
Right.
It's energy.
It's your intention
And
behind it. If you're saying it knowing that it's a lie versus later, you had a different perspective, that's not a lie. That just means you changed your mind. You saw things from a different perspective than you did before. And to your point on what you were saying earlier regarding letting someone abuse you, I mean, you really nailed it and you made me think of something I wrote down. It's like, oh, so I have a friend who, when she was really young, I think the book came out in 1992. So we were like 18 or something. But so she read A Return to Love, and in her 18-year-old mind, she took this, her perception was that you always forgive, always forgive, always. So what she ended up doing in life was becoming that person who was letting people abuse them, and a huge people pleaser, but also accepting abuse because she thought that meant she's being spiritual because I'm allowing, I'm forgiving this person and it's okay. But being truly spiritual, it requires self-care. Like, we need to take care of ourselves too. We can have
right,
compassion. We can have compassion for that person, even if they're abusing us, but we can have compassion and forgiveness from a distance. That doesn't mean we need to keep that person who's abusing us in our life. It means, when we don't forgive someone, as you know, it hurts us more than it
right,
hurts them. So
right.
it's important to forgive, but forgiveness doesn't mean, I want everyone to know, that doesn't mean you keep this person in your life and keep allowing and tolerating abuse. You can forgive, you can still forgive, you can still have compassion, because usually if someone's, it's true, hurt people, right? So something probably happened, they have their own wounds that they're dealing with, or they, probably wouldn't be, they were probably abused too in the past. There's a really good chance.
Well, and even going back to that cycle, that pain is the growth. And if we're going to talk about love, well, unconditional love has no conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So we can love somebody, and it's been my experience that when somebody leaves your life, whether by your choice or their choice, and you still love them, you still care for them. They can call you at 3 o'clock in the morning, and if they absolutely need your help, you're going to get up and you're going to go help them out. That's unconditional love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If
It's not
it's
the
like,
list out kind, but it's
no,
it's
it's real
it's
world
good.
love.
Yeah.
I'm going to help you because you need it, not
As long
because
as
you
you're not
want it.
doing it to be a people pleaser still, just because you're still thinking, because some people are going to do it because they're like, maybe there's still a chance with this person if I do them this favor. So I think it would be easy for us to trick ourselves in that way. That could be tricky, where we're like, this unconditional love versus maybe manipulating a situation. Like, if I do this for them, it's conditional. Like, they might want to get back together with me. It could it could be condition in disguise of unconditioned.
Right. They're all conditions. We live a conditional life. One
Yeah.
minute we're here, one minute we're not. So the question that I feel like you should ask yourself is, what am I getting from this? What am I gaining from this? Am
Mhm.
I getting to help somebody and that made me feel good? Then yeah, do it.
Yeah.
If I'm doing it for them and I don't want to do it, okay, well now I have to watch what I'm doing.
Hmm.
I remember when I had the talent agency and I represented models and actors and all that. And when that all went away, I was so angry. I was like, I'm doing this for all these people. I work 80 hours, and I'm destroying my relationships and I'm doing all this stuff and I'm da 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 for other people. And then one day I was talking to somebody and I stopped and started giggling, and they're like, "What?" I was like, I just realized that I don't do anything for anyone other than myself.
Oh, that's a big awakening moment. You
And
got out of your ego trap. Ego traps are everywhere, aren't they?
oh, you first.
You froze too. I was just saying, like, ego traps are
You know it.
everywhere. Am I frozen?
Mm-hmm. No, you're good.
Okay.
And it's just the I. It's just the individual. I'm completely black now. That's why I had to move. Thank you though.
There you are. There be loving.
Yeah, the bringer of light, you
The
know.
bringer of light.
We're back. I had to go into my shadow self for a second to
Yeah, you did. And now you'll be better for it.
to go back inside. You know, because that's where the seeds grow. You know, you can't grow a seed in light. It dries out. It has to go into the darkness. And so we can't be afraid of our shadow. We can't be afraid of our childhood wounds. We can't be afraid of people hurting us. Because if they do, then we're living in fear. You know, the question is this something that I want to experience? Is this something that I can grow through? Is this something that I'm going to gain something through it? Am I going to have the experience? Is it somebody that I want to walk with?
Right.
You know, like those are the important things, and everything else is ego.
So do you think
Because
that's the solution? Like what would you say, like a simple solution for the audience here, for them to be able to unify their hearts and their bodies and their minds? Like do you have any like simple solutions for them they could start like today doing?
so the first thing that I would do is just put your hand on your heart and breathe. And
Any type of breathing, like that block breathing, or just anything. You don't have to count, because I hear all kinds of things.
No, because then that's your ego again, right? I need to have this perfect. I need to have this perfect practice. And if I'm not doing this perfect practice, then I'm not practicing perfect. But no,
don't get into the
just connect. Just connect to yourself. Feel your heart, your heartbeat, and
Quiet
let everything. Don't even quiet your mind. Let it do what it's going to do, and just watch it.
I heard somebody say the other day, just kind of to your point, was when people tell you just to empty your mind, that's impossible. But it's just more about meditation is more focusing on one thing, whether it's your breathing, whether it's a candle, whether it's the air conditioning, just focusing on one thing. And like to tell people to empty their mind is actually that's going to make them crazy. That's like anti-meditation, because telling them to control thoughts and empty their mind is impossible for the majority of us. So focusing on one thing is possible for all of us. It is. We focus on our breath.
But somatics is focusing on the body, right? Because this is where we're actually at. This is all of us. You know, and I do know of one time that you can empty your mind, and they have a term for that. It's called brain dead.
Brain dead. Is that what you said? Brain dead?
Yeah, brain dead. You won't be thinking. I mean, even people in comas, they have brain activity. They're having dreams. They're having, but they're not in their body right now, but their brain's still active.
Well, what about consciousness? Because like most time when I've been obsessed with near-death experiences, they still have their consciousness goes with them. It's just the like you said, the meat suit, the avatar is still here and lifeless, but their consciousness is still there.
Consciousness is a term that we could call spirit.
Yeah.
That's all we are. We are consciousness.
But they're still having thoughts, like even though their avatars no longer alive.
And the whole idea of consciousness is to become informed into the being that we want to be.
So what would you
and so
sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So if we're studying a lot of spiritual texts, I mean, I just had my mind blown today on a love card book. I mean, it was mind boggling. And when it said, my purpose here is to be creative mentally. And, I was being accused of not being enough in my heart. Well, that's my journey. So, having such a strong mind and being able to see so many different perspectives and so many avenues and being able to accept everybody for where they are, I mean, we had an experience the other day and at Sundance, and I was consulting with somebody. We were having a conversation, and she goes, "How do you do that?" And I said, "Well, I understand that they're both ego and they're being. And anytime that this is going, they're in their ego. Because just being there, that's where we're actually in our truth. So if we're truly kind, if we're truly loving, if we're truly things, we're not trying to do anything. We just are. You
True.
know, if I'm being threatened and I go into a fight response to protect myself, that's my true being in that moment.
True.
Now, once I get out of that, just like a gazelle or anything else, once they get out of that situation, they go back to eating grass or doing whatever they do, because that's their true beingness. But
Hmm.
they have to respond or react to get out of the danger.
Right. And that's what we're seeing with trauma. And that was going to be the last question I asked you about trauma. Because I think a lot of like you, that's a perfect transition here because a lot of, animals will get into that fight or flight, the adrenaline rush, da, 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 and then they just go right back. Humans from trauma, we tend to stay and keep that trauma for, years and years and years. So what are some ways that you would suggest to the audience to find like intentional healing, like in the present moment, keep them in the now moment, as opposed to allowing that stay in that fight or flight, dysregulated nervous system mode due to trauma?
Um, Hand on the heart and breathe.
Oh, the same thing. Same answer.
Because if you're not in danger, that's going to ground you every time.
Bring you
And
back. Yeah, it brings you back,
yeah, and energy healing is a wonderful thing, because it's not creating more content
which is
for the
what you do.
mind.
That's what you do, right?
It's
Energy healing.
Yeah, and that's what I found through coaching, right? Like I could give people perspectives, but then they kept repeating the patterns. It's because they haven't healed their nervous system through the energy.
You got to
So
shift that
doing the
energy.
energy work, and energy work itself, I mean, if we were going to look at the masculine and the feminine, feminine being more heart and masculine being more mind. Well, they're both needed. And in Tantra, they talk about non-duality, becoming one being.
Right.
And we do that by finding, they say the longest journey in our life is about 6 inches,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yep.
because the mind's always going to create a story. Well, that's our trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's our conditioning. That's our fears. That's our insecurities. That's, all those things. And then if we go, well, okay, that happened and I survived it. Do I want to go through another similar experience? For me, for the most part, I would say yes. No, I don't want to be robbed. No, I don't want to be hurt. All those various different things. No, I didn't like that experience. But if it wasn't for that experience, you and I wouldn't be sitting here today having our conversation.
Exactly. Exactly.
So in the philosophy of Gage, that's the 5 principles that I talked about: gratitude, awareness, unity, growth, energy. Growth is natural. If we're forcing growth
Mhm.
by expectations, by
Mm.
goals, by intentionality, we are in fear,
An ego.
because
Yeah, it's another damn ego trap.
right. And doesn't mean that those things aren't valuable,
Mhm.
but even in manifestation, they say set the intention and then let it go.
Yeah, and then
You
there's a
know,
time to take action. Like the universe does love action, but it's got to be at the right timing. When we're feeling that inspiration, when we're feeling like divinely guided, take action. But anyone watching this, when you're feeling really low frequency or depressed, that's not the time to take action. That's not the time to write your
well,
book. You're not going to be
you
creative.
have to work harder. Yeah, you have to work harder at it. I remember
Yeah,
when I
you're not
first
in alignment.
started doing guided meditation, and the guy's like, you can manifest any, and I'm not going to give names because I'm not here to bash anybody, and there's a lot of followers for this fellow, but
I
he's
know
like, you can
exactly. I
manifest
already know who
anything.
you're talking about because we talked about him the other day. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Manifest anything from your couch, and I'm thinking, I want to win the lottery, but then I'm going to have to get a lottery ticket, or I'm going to have to find a lottery
Yep.
ticket. Somebody's going to have to give me a lottery ticket. Something's going to have to happen that's divinely led
Mhm.
for that to happen for us.
There's no law of attraction without taking action. You can't just sit on a meditation cushion and think positive thoughts all day and have things magnetically attracted to you. We take action. We just got to learn how to do it in the right moments and it is
Well, and
divinely
there's time
coordinated
for
to
that,
us.
right?
Hmm?
I mean, and it does happen, in a lot of senses. People will take care of you. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was in meditation for so long, the rats are eating his feet and all that kind of stuff. Things still happen for him.
That's pretty extreme. I don't think that I'm like that patient. I'm not patient enough for that stuff. But so let's say the last thing I'm going to ask is this is just something I'm wondering, and because I'm sure everybody's wondering, like let's say somebody's first of all, I want you to tell us if somebody signed up, like what would that experience be? Let's say someone wants to be your client. Number one, how do they reach you? How do they find you? And then
Mhm.
what would that experience be like? Is it different for everyone, or do you have like courses, or like where can they find you also?
So you can find me at enhancingyourworld.com. Um,
Enhancingtheworld.com.
yeah, and then I also have another page, gaugeyourlife.com. And they're just set up differently. The Enhancing Your World is a business, and Gauge Your Life is a church,
The
to
community.
keep me separated from the state stuff, because of some of
Gotcha.
the things that we do are kind of not
Regulated.
accepted. And
Yeah.
yeah, but Enhancing Your World, that's where everybody can go to find out about that. And I'm sorry I dropped what you were saying.
I was just wondering, like if it's individual for each person, if you have courses they could take, or what would that experience be like if someone's thinking about contacting you to coach them or to
There's commonality, there's
guide.
similarities to everybody, but everybody, it's not my job to give someone a map to their highest destiny. It's their job my job, and that's why I call myself a guide rather than a coach, is to say, okay, this is where you're at.
Mhm,
This is where you want to go.
mhm,
And here's some possible paths to get there.
mhm.
Now, what's right for you isn't right for everybody. So, for you, for example, I wouldn't say, okay, you got to do plant medicine because that's going to change your
Right.
world. Absolutely, it would change your world, but maybe not in a way that you would like.
Yeah.
So then you're going to be upset with me.
Hmm.
So, our job, I believe, as guides or as healers or any of those things, is to hold sacred space. So that's why I use the 5 universal principles, because they work every time.
And we
They're
teach people how
universal.
to use their own higher, listen to their higher self, listen to their inner being, whatever you want to call it. We all have that inner connection. Just there's a learning curve. Like there was a time I didn't know how
Right.
to listen to it too. It's always been there. It's just I was disconnecting myself.
Well, and I just was talking to a friend the other day, and she's telling me a story, and I started giggling, and she's like, "Oh, oh," like what? And I was like, "That guy's just trying to get it. He's trying to sleep with you." And she's like, "Yeah, I got that vibe too." And I was like, "So why are we even discussing this?" And I was like, "You gotta quit second guessing yourself."
Yeah.
And then she started giving me all these reasons. Well, I need the job, I need money, I need this, da 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 da. And I'm like, "But you already got your answer. So do you want to have that experience or not?" Because whether you say yes or no to his advance is whether what you're going to go down is going to be a successful experience or not.
Right. It's like a sacred contract you're about to sign and not a good one.
Well, or maybe it's a great one. I mean, it just depends on that
True.
situation and where they're at, and what they want to have. But when we listen to that, my uh, my last relationship, before we disbanded, or broke up, in physical reality, we're very much still here in the energetic field, and it's really challenging sometimes because I'm like, get out of my head, like I'm tired of thinking about this. But I heard she's gonna leave, and that, for a person that has abandonment and betrayal issues,
Hmm.
that's a test, right?
Yeah.
So then I sat back and I said, okay, well, what happens then? What's the outcome? And I
Mm-hmm.
said, well, this is going to test your relationship. And now what I've learned is my love isn't based on conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Because would I want to take her back? What would I want? Absolutely. We would have to work on some things. We would have to have a lot of conversations. We would have to, but if that's not her will or her want,
Right.
it's not my job to convince her of
Right.
how great.
You have to have two willing partners to have a conscious relationship, and will cannot be forced on the other person. It just is what it is.
No.
But yeah, so well, that's very interesting that you heard that.
And
Heard that, like
and
you,
then
like
and
it
then
was like a download. Is that what you mean?
totally. I was doing the dishes and I just was like, and I was like, dang, okay,
Your like your
you
guide,
know.
maybe.
Yeah, and I still reacted in an immature way in a little bit. I mean, I'll hold my own responsibility. I was shocked. I mean, we were getting ready to get married in a few months, and so I was just like, even though I knew it was coming in, it was just like the way it happened, and then all hearing all the things, and all the accusations and the victimization of me, and like that brought up even more stuff for me to heal.
Exactly. And that's what, when we get triggered, that's, I mean, it's really tough in the moment, but it really is just indicators of where we need to heal still, where we thought we might have been healed. And it's so important to not beat ourselves up. And I remember, Chris, I remember your Facebook post when that happened, and you were like beating yourself
Mhm.
up and very disappointed in yourself. And to me, beating yourself up is almost as bad as the reaction to begin with, because it's just, I was like, but it's okay, because we all find ourselves there again. And as long as we grow from it, as long as
Mhm.
it's not a mistake, and everything's perfect. It's hard to
Yeah,
feel,
I heard somebody
it's
that,
hard to feel that way in the moment. I get it.
right. Yeah, when you hurt somebody, especially when you care about them, right? You're going to take
Yeah.
your personal responsibility, and
Yeah.
accountability is important. So
Accountability.
I wanted to be accountable and responsible for the part that I played in the relationship, and saying these are the things that I did to
Yeah.
get this outcome,
Yeah.
and that that was a big thing for both of us. Was when we would have an argument and I always heard you, and I'm like, I know, yes, and we're mirrors, so you
Yeah.
too. Because if we can both acknowledge that we're doing it to each other, whether we're conscious of it or not, well, then we can actually heal it. But
Mhm.
if we're projecting it outwardly or projecting it inwardly, then we're only at one spectrum of the energy.
And it's so tough when you're in it, because literally, I think it was Mel Robbins that said this, but when you could be too grown, emotionally advanced, emotionally mature adults, and when you're
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of an argument, you go back to that subconscious, illogical, irrational. That's why these really emotionally mature adults can suddenly seem like toddlers in the moment, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's just because that part of your brain shuts down and you only have access to the irrational part. And she said, the example she gave is like, well, just imagine, like, if your house is on fire, and you're like, you just notice your house is on fire, and you're like, oh my God, my house is on fire. Try to do a math problem in that moment. You can't, because those
Right.
two parts of your brain, the rational and irrational, they don't work at the same time, right? So like you're literally disconnected
Right.
from, so that's why it's so important for me. I know for me, this helps to take, you can even discuss it in advance if you're with a conscious partner. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you set a time limit though. Like, let's take, 5 to 10 minutes or whatever you guys decide together before we start, because we need to really get out of that part of our brain that just goes back to the, you know, irrational toddler in us, that unhealed child who wants to just be a brat in the moment, and respond
Right.
to the child when we're not children anymore. And so if you take that little break from each other when you're in the heat of it, it's so hard to do, but it just makes all the difference in the world, and I think prevents a lot of damage, because once certain things are said out loud, they can't be taken back. And I just,
Well, and that's where forgiveness comes in, and all that, and
yeah,
I mean,
we can forgive, but we
the
can't always forget. And
right,
words really can stick with somebody um, permanently.
if they choose it to.
Yeah. We got a lot of
And
sensitive
that's
people.
the work, right? Because you have to ask yourself, maybe just in that example, I know that I was able to move through things and process things because I've had a lot of stuff happen to me. So, and I've done, whatever, a lot of pre-work, right? We would call that. So like I could get back to center a little bit faster than my partner. So maybe
True.
5 minutes is good for me, but maybe they need all day.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
where you
they
got to
need
discuss
three.
it.
Maybe they need a week. Maybe they need to go on vacation. Maybe they got to go do something else. The point though is when that timing's, maybe it's 6 months. And after 6 months, you come back together, or a year or whatever it is after that, and say, okay, let's get back to the issue,
Hmm.
and how can we resolve it? Because if we have true faith, we have true belief, we have value for that individual, then time is a man-made structure, and it's not linear. So what one needs isn't always necessarily valid for the other person. But I know some of the best healing that I've had in my relationships came years afterwards
Hmm.
of not speaking with that person. And then all of a sudden you get those, you should reach out. You
Yeah.
should just say hi and see what happens. And then they're not in their pain body anymore. They've done their own growth. They've had a couple more experiences, a couple bad relationships, a couple good relationships, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden you can come back as two human beings again and say, okay, well, maybe we're not ever going to be romantically involved with each other anymore because you found somebody that you're happy with. I'm not trying to change who you are or where you're at in life. However, can we resolve this karma between us so there isn't that dis-ease from where we were back then? When I moved on my parents' property, all those childhood things was coming up again that I thought I had healed
Right.
because I wasn't in it like I had been before, and I could always leave. I don't like how the way you're talking to me. I'm out the door. I'm going back to my safety spot. But the unconditional love part of me has to recognize
Hmm.
that if I can see someone in their worst moment and still have love or compassion for them, then I've done a lot of work.
Right.
Now if they're not trying to not cause harm with people, then the warrior in me is going to want to slit their throat because it's not. We had a circumstance where somebody came in, they were a pedophile, and they came to a sacred ceremony, and a lot of people were on guard, which they should be, right?
Right.
And a heightened sense of awareness of making sure that nothing bad happens because maybe they're not going to hold themselves accountable,
Hmm.
and they're going to do something. But at the same time, the fact that they were there and they were still accepted into that taught me a deeper level of compassion. Now the empath in me was like, "You're dark person.
Hmm.
I don't I don't really want you to touch me. I don't want you to
Right.
be in my
I
energy
couldn't
field."
be, I would need, I'm too much into protecting my energy. I would have to have a healthy boundary there and not have that person in my vicinity.
Right.
But that's just me, you know. But I was like
Right.
earlier when I was talking about that, just taking a break, I was just trying to give like practical advice to someone who maybe
Mhm.
lives with someone and they already are with them and they
Mhm.
deal with them daily and they can't really take, they have kids together, they can't really just take 6 months off or something like that, just for them to just try to set something up in advance to where that okay, when we're getting to this point, it's okay to take a break. It's not because like you're walking out, that hurts people. Hanging up the phone hurts people. But if we have it already
Mhm.
prearranged, it's different, totally different. Then you're like, it's already set up. This is
Right.
what we're doing to save the relationship, not to harm the relationship or
Right.
trigger your abandonment wounds, things like that.
Right. Yeah. and just being aware that, hey, that's an automatic response. I don't even notice that I'm doing it
Yeah.
until I'm back into my body.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I just abandoned you. I just walked away from you. I'm so sorry. That's not my intention. I didn't mean to yell at you. That's not my intentional way of wanting to do life. But I
Right.
reacted. So now that I know that that's a pattern of mine, can we work through this
Mhm.
with conscious awareness
Mhm.
that it's not where I want to stay, but that's where I'm at in this part of my journey. And the more we regulate, the more I regulate my nervous system, the less I'm gonna be in react, which is get out of there because you're gonna hurt something,
Right.
because that's where it's coming from. It's me trying to protect the other person from being violent or being, like you said, saying something that you don't mean or anything like that, because I'm at a high emotional state,
Mhm.
and I want to regulate. And if I'm not consciously aware to do this,
Mhm.
and
Get
you
ground.
know, and even when I've asked my partners, hey, if I'm like that, all you got to do is touch me, get me in my body, because I'm up here. If I'm up, if I'm acting like my little kid that is throwing a tantrum, which is a normal state, right? Like when you tell your kids no when they're little, they're going to throw a tantrum, and if we scold them for that, that's when they're going to have those issues, But if we're like, it's okay, you can let
Mhm.
it out, man, scream, yell, break something, I don't care, whatever you got to do to let that energy process itself.
Mhm.
Well, then it doesn't become a trauma. It doesn't stay ingrained or embodied in the body. And then they're not going to have to work so hard later in life because they have all this residual stuff
Right.
that's been unprocessed. So,
Yeah, I agree totally. Well, Chris, I feel like you gave so much valuable information. Thank you so, so much for agreeing to have this talk. And I know it's going to
oh,
help so many
absolutely.
people. And I hope everyone, who watches this, reach out to Chris. It was gageyourlife.com and
That's the nonprofit church where we do more sacred ceremonies and things like that. So the enhancing your world is
Enhancing
is
Your World.
is
Okay. So
yeah.
the enhancingyourworld.com. And I'm going to also put those links in the show notes underneath this video for everyone to click on. Um,
Cool.
and except Instagram doesn't let you do that. They don't let you do that. You gotta, but
Yeah.
they'll find you. They will find you.
Yeah.
They will dig and they will find you. So
It's
I
been my experience. People will find you whether you're on that stuff or not. Some of the most successful spiritual people I know don't own any of it.
true.
And they have plenty of people. They just show up.
It is, it's true. They just will attract the right people to them, whether they're trying or not. There's like sometimes not even any, I know what you mean. There's no advertising. It's honestly, the most of my clients are word of mouth. I still have to stay on social media, because because you kind of have to, but most of my clients are heard about me from another client. So, but then you still want to have, I like to give out a lot of free information like we're doing,
Mhm.
give you visibility. I like to uplift other people because this also, maybe nobody's going to call you off of this, but we're going to definitely turn on, wake up some people to maybe things they had never thought about before and how to be a more
Yeah,
conscious partner. Because the way
absolutely.
you were talking about responding is unfortunately very uncommon. The way that the examples that you give is not what most people do. I'm going to say 95%. I'm going to say it's very rare
I,
you find conscious relationships. Most people want to get dug into their side, and argue about
right.
trivial things just to be right. That's saying, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? So,
Well,
um,
now recruit other people too, right? well, so and so said that I was right, and you were doing this to me. Blah blah blah. Okay, well,
Yeah.
great. Well, why are you bringing all these extra people into our relationship? Like,
Oh, like they're taking a poll. Yeah, I've like, I don't
yeah.
care. This is like, because we're all entitled to our perception and our viewpoints. And yeah, I've had that happen to me. And I found it to be one of the most ridiculous things because this is still how I feel. And then that's somebody invalidating your feelings in the moment. And that's definitely not a conscious behavior. And also, let's face it, when somebody's taking a poll from their friends or asking, well, so and so said, are their friends gonna, if it was me asking my friends, they're gonna side with me and tell me what I want to hear, and vice versa. Like that's like Googling what you or want to look for. You can always find anything that, to support your you can find whatever
Right.
you want to support your beliefs. You just, if you look
Yeah.
on that side of the argument, it's very easy to do. But
Mhm.
anyway, Chris, I thank you again so much. I'm so appreciative of the time. And I will talk to you soon. Actually,
Sounds good. I look forward
you
to
stay
learning.
on here with me, but we'll say bye to the audience. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye, everybody.